Hello, and welcome to Professor Mirko Kovac's inaugural lecture on bio-inspired drones. I'm Ferry Aliyobadi, Professor of Aerostructure at the Aeronautics Department. Mirko, with his students and collaborators, have made significant advances in the field of aerial robotics, which include robots which are designed to sample water, 3D print repair, fly through forests, just to name a few. Their endeavors have resulted in Mirko winning several awards and numerous publications in reputable journals, including Nature. Mirko is currently holding a prestigious ERC award, as well as several other prestigious awards that he has held in the past. Before I pass to Mirko to start his lecture, I'd like to announce that there is a Q&A button that you may post your questions on the Q&A and which appears on the side of the screen. And if you don't want, as this session is being recorded, if you do not wish for your name to appear, you can post them anonymously. If somebody has made a comment which you particularly like, please give it a thumbs up and we give that one a priority. So now, without further ado, I'll ask Professor Mirko Kovac to start his lecture. Mirko.
Thank you very much, Ferry. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. It is my great pleasure and it is my great honor to present this lecture today. And I would like to devote this lecture to two principles. Principle number one is the people. So all the people who helped me to be here, standing here today, speaking, having the voice, but also helped to develop all these robots and projects that we are having. And principle number two, which is the purpose of these robots. So the things they can do. And hopefully together with you, together as a community, we can create robots that can really do sustainable societal good. So not just existing for the sake of existing, but actually having an impact that is positive, life supportive, and gives hope. Now, the picture I put here is a bee, so it's not a robot, but in some way it is the holy grail of robotics, which is to create lifelike robots that are, able to move in complex, unpredictable environments and do interaction with the environment, collecting food, building nests, and reproducing. So this vision of artificial animals, artificial lifelike, bio-inspired systems is what has been driving me throughout my career and actually throughout my life. And if I look back a few years back, quite a few, I was still very interested in birds, and birds are really amazing of what they can do. So out of this, in 2012, I started the position at Imperial, and the second PhD student who started in my group was Thomas Creedy, and Thomas was an ecologist. And as an ecologist, one of his interests and research questions was how to sample the environment. So how to sense environmental parameters in order to validate climate models in the rainforest, as you see here. And at that time, we really wanted to use flying robots to do this sampling, do the environmental detections of different parameters in order to validate what is happening in the forest and how climate change influences the microclimates in the forests. At that time, the systems were not ready. So you see, it's very hard to fly. Everything is moving. There's a lot of light changes. The structures are moving. The leaves are moving. So it's very, very difficult to develop robots that can move precisely and robustly in those environments. So since then, it has been my drive to create systems that can really address those questions of environmental sensing. So the mission was always to create robots that can measure the environment and also modify the environment, and like this deliver sustainable outcomes. Now, what do we mean by sustainable outcomes? And one of them is, of course, monitoring climate, monitoring the water health, the forest health, but also interacting with aging assets, so old infrastructure that is, damaged or might need repairs, and actually do the repair with the robots. Very much aligned with this are, of course, are the United Nations Sustainability Goals, and this is how we try to frame the work and address those goals of the United Nations. The hypothesis underlying everything is that lifelike robots can provide data at a higher spatial temporal resolution, so more data, but also at a lower cost and at a lower risk compared to established methods of environmental sensing and manufacturing. So this is the question. And I hope that through the next few slides, I will be able to provide some evidence that lifelike robotics, bio-inspired robotics, can give value and can help us to achieve those very ambitious and large goals. Now, if you want to then build such lifelike robots, there are of course different ways how to do that. And think about robotics, and the community or the field of robotics often starts like that. So it starts with modeling. So you have an idea of a robot, you start on paper, you start in simulation, then you develop a controller and select the components, ideally that fit as well as possible to the controller and to the simulations. Then the testing happens in laboratory and then eventually in outdoor environments. This is often very good, and there are amazing videos of robots that can jump around, move around, and so on. It's really impressive. But there are also videos that show how systems like that might not be as robust in outdoor unpredictable environments, such as walking on sand, for example, or swimming on water, or surfing, for example, or flying. And so the more unpredictable the environment is, the more difficult it becomes to have a modeling and simulation-based approach to robotics. So we need to incorporate the mechanics, the intelligence of the robots too. And if you think about how living systems work, they work very differently. In fact, they grow, and as they grow, they change the body, they learn, they adapt their controllers, their nervous systems, the muscles adapt and change. And this co-evolution of different actuation, sensory systems, together with materials and the body morphology, is really what distinguishes natural design, natural construction of systems compared to traditional robots and robotic systems. So in order to try to address this and build robots that are more lifelike, we wrote this paper here that came out in 2020, where we defined the term physical artificial intelligence as being the development methodology for lifelike robotics. And the core idea in this is that we need to co-evolve the materials, the chemistry, the biology, the controllers, the design of the robots all together. So we cannot take a dead robot body and put a controller on it. Instead, we need to change the body as we learn the controller, as we develop the materials, as we develop the application and the motion and behavior. And this integrated development methodology is very difficult to achieve because it requires multidisciplinary skills and interactions with different disciplines, but also it needs a mindset of openness and integration through these different development cycles. Okay, so another example, just to illustrate that a bit, is this paper here that came out in 2016, where we try to define the challenge of perching to a structure. So if you have a robot or an animal that wants to land on a surface, it can do that with a lot of planning, control, sensing, like an eagle or an aircraft that pitches up and attaches to the surface, but also needs a lot of mechanical intelligence or embodied intelligence. So the physicality of the robot can help in this perching task. So a fly, for example, or a bee, they use their antennas or their legs to align themselves to the surface. And this physical alignment, this physical damping of the impact and robustness to impact really complements the sensory information they have. So it's a physicality and the digital intelligence that come together. And this, I think, is very key. Now, we can then come back to the United Nations Sustainability Goals, and the projects we have I grouped here in 6 areas to identify or to demonstrate how they address those goals and what are the key applications. So we work on robots that can fly inside of fire and like this survive fire and do different tasks, or attach to wind turbines in forests or to bridges, take samples and even construct by themselves. So in the following slides, I will give a few highlight examples of those areas. I will not talk about everything, but just a few selected examples to illustrate how we can address those questions. Now, the first one is the environmental sensing in the forest. And why would you want to have robots in the forest, and what can you sense? Now, an example is tree biopsy. For example, taking a sample from a tree and detect the environmental DNA, like this identify the biodiversity of the tree. It can also be ash dieback. So ash trees have a disease called ash dieback, which makes them lose leaves, and this is a big problem, so we can use robots to identify that. We can also detect biomass, quantify biodiversity, birds populations, but also extreme events. And so we have been working on that for quite a while already, and we developed various robots that can attach to surfaces and like these place sensors in the environment. I would like to highlight just one approach of how to do that, how to fly through a forest. And also there, we can take inspiration from insects, in this example, the bees. And something that the bees do very well is to use very little sensors, but allowing them to do autonomous motion and flight through the environment. And one of the principles that they do is that they use for the visual autonomy is called optic flow divergence, or optic flow divergence-based navigation. And so this you can imagine like that. If you approach a surface, right, you see that on your visual field, on your retina, the vision field or the pattern of the surface expands. And this expansion field is proportional to the velocity over the distance. So the closer you are, the more quickly it expands, or the more fast you fly, the more quickly it expands. So it is possible to use this expansion on the retina as a trigger to stop in front of the surface. And this has been used quite a bit in the community, and has been used as well to avoid obstacles. Now, the challenge in this is that as the environment is not flat, so as you see here, like a complex three-dimensional environment, then this threshold-based approach can give you a false alarm. So it can spike, and then you might think that the surface is there, but it's really not there. And because of that, we had to look into methods how to estimate the surface more robustly. And this is a paper that we wrote here in 2021, where we call this a fictional wall hypothesis. So we take the state vector of the robot and make an observation, so the optic flow divergence, but also other elements, such as the acceleration on the IMU on the robot. We can then use an extended Kalman filter, which gives an estimate on the actual distance to the surface. And this works surprisingly, somewhat surprisingly well, actually, even in completely unknown and unstructured environments. So here you see the robot, it can fly, stop in front of the wall, stop in front of bushes, and also fly through openings in the forest. And this robot here is only about 100, 150 grams in weight. So it's extremely lightweight, extremely small, and it uses only about 20 grams of electronics to calculate that. So we don't need a lot of computation and a lot of complex sensing to detect the environment and have autonomy. Maybe a little bit of sensing with a little bit of clever engineering that we can copy or learn from nature might give us some autonomy that is surprisingly capable. Now, of course, it's not perfect, and small features in the environment might not trigger the optic flow, and so it might not see it perfectly well. And because of that, we can combine it with the physicality and make the systems crash robust. And for that, we have this paper here where we look at origami structures that are decoupling the yawing moment on impact and reducing the impact peak force. And like this can lead to a decoupling of the moment and make more robust motion through the environment. So on the top left, you see different ways how to protect the robot. But if you use a protector that is rotary, that can be decoupled, and that is soft, so has an origami-based pattern, we can really reduce the keep force, the force acting on the robot, and like this make it more crash resilient. We can model this using finite element methods and then design the protection cage in a way to be suitable for whatever systems we are testing. So on the left side, you see a classical protecting ring, and on the right side, you see the rotary origami structure that we built. So you see the left, even a small crash can lead to a complete crash of the robot. And here with the ring, it can have a more robust motion through the environment, like this, having a higher level of resilience. So the combination of this type of physicality, physical resilience, with minimalist sensing, I think gives quite some surprising capability that the robots can have, like this, move through complex environments. Now, another approach that I would like to share today is the idea to place sensors remotely. So what if you cannot actually approach the tree? What if there are hanging leaves or structures in the forest? And for that, we explored the idea of using dart shooting drones. So the robot would fly, detect a tree, would use three-dimensional sensing, so a 3D map of the environment, identify where it wants to place a sensor, and then shoot the sensor. By calculating the trajectory, you can do this very precisely, actually with a precision of about a few centimeters on few meter distance. And this sensor then can remain there and sense different things in the environment. So it is a very fast method of placing sensors in the environment. So if you look here in a kind of natural environment, here in a forest, as you see here, it would be very difficult to place the sensors manually. We need to climb up the tree, place the sensors, retrieve it. But with this method, it can be much faster and much cheaper as well. We can then use the sensors and detect different things of the environment. For example, the acoustic signatures. So we can make microphones, have microphones on those sensors, and then detect what it records, and then analyze this data using machine learning algorithms to identify the bird species that it hears, the richness and the abundance of the species. And this we have done and shown that we can actually detect different types of species of birds across the canopy, so across the height of the trees. So this is a method that can be used to detect biodiversity much more quickly and much more safely compared to a manual sensor placement. Okay, so this leads me to another question, which is what if the sensor would remain there, or what if you would shoot something that needs to be there for years, but then should leave minimal environmental footprint? And so out of that came this idea to have robots that would fly and then deploy biodegradable sensors in the environment. Those sensors could detect different things. So eventually acoustic signatures, but also pH levels, temperature, humidity, and like this give insights into the microclimates across the different areas of the forest. So this year came out a paper we wrote, a perspective piece on that, where we tried to outline of how the potential of these biodegradable sensors could bring value for environmental sensing and be combined with aerial robotics. So in the near future, so near term, we can sense humidity, temperatures, and that's actually relatively easy to do with materials that are fully biodegradable, but can give sensor information and like this feed the information back to the drone. In the midterm, we can do that for rainwater quality, so pH levels, but also soil compaction, flow rates, and make systems that can even move or be actuated and like this move through the environment. And in the long term, it could be even fully intelligent sensors, audio recording, imaging devices. So the whole field of biodegradable electronics feeds into that, but biodegradable robotics and transient robotics, as we call it, is a key area that needs to be developed to achieve this as well. So at EMPA here, given that EMPA is a material science institute, we work very much on this. And so since 2019, we started these activities, and we work on the structural materials that give structural adaptation, actuation materials, so give actuation concepts and principles for robotics, and sensing materials that can provide the sensor information. So we work on a lot of different things here, but I would like to just highlight one example of each area. So if you think about structure, then really we want to create something that is biodegradable, but it's easy to fabricate and can be very lightweight and very strong. So we have here an example of that where we mix microfibrillated cellulose. So it's a cellulose material that is in a suspension, and then can be molded and then freeze dried, leaving eventually us with this kind of cryogel composites, as you see here on the right side. So depending on how we tune the process, we can have different porosities and different mechanical properties of the cryogel composite. And we can also mix different things such as gelatin inside of it to change the properties. So we can then see the compressive strength or the density and see that actually we want to have something that has a very high compressive strength, but very low density. So it's lightweight and strong. And so this type of methods leave us with really very good materials that can be very lightweight and strong, and like this be very good building blocks for aerial robotics. We can then functionalize those. Functionalization means that they have certain functions that is added to them, such as sensing or like conductive properties. And this we can do with screen printing or inkjet printing conductive inks on the material, and then create structures that can be like a sensing skin on the robot, and like this react to certain stimuli or be used to detect the structural change or the morphological state of the robot. One step over that, we can then think about actuation. And here we developed a system that is biodegradable, fully biodegradable, only material based, but can give some level of actuation of the structure by using humidity reactive composites. So you see here the video in the middle is a sheet that is moving depending on how the humidity in the environment changes. We can use that to deploy a sensor pod on top of a small glider. So on the bottom right, you see a small glider that has a small pod, like a flower. It opens when it gets wet, and then has litmus paper, so litmus material, so a pH sensitive material that measures the acidity of the environment and changes color accordingly. And like this can be read out of the environment. So the systems could be deployed. They can glide and disperse very well because they have a very good gliding ratio, as you see in the video, and then selectively detect certain features such as the pH levels in the environment by having fully biodegradable material solutions without any electronics or any kind of non-biodegradable components. Okay, so I would like to share with you a second example. And this is the idea to use flying robots to attach to wind turbines and do different wind turbine inspection and repair tasks. The vision is that they attach themselves and like this can remain aloft stronger, remain on the wind turbine for longer time without using precious flight energy. So using little energy and remain there, attach themselves to repair surface measurements or thickness measurements of the materials. For that, they need to interact with the material, have contact with the material. And of course, animals, and there are not many animals that do that, so some spiders do similar things, but animals still have a long way to go. So they have to evolve certain features and virtues to do these type of things. Because of that, we can take inspiration from superheroes. In particular, one of my favorite superheroes is the Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is amazing of what he can do. He can shoot those anchors, move through the environment, attach himself through, and like this interact with the environment in a very capable manner. So here's a project that is somewhat Spider, but even Spider-Man inspired. And you see how small robots could deploy strings and weave nets around trees or different other environments. And like this, make temporary support scaffolds in the environment. This is actually quite interesting, I found, because they can do that even if they don't know the tree structure. So the tree is very complex and they can still attach themselves to this and make the anchors and allow other robots to then attach themselves to it, observe the environment, eventually go up and down, like so sense at different heights, and then free themselves from those tensile structures and fly off again, bringing the data home. So this could be done with the silk material, as I think it's done in this example, which is also completely biodegradable. So it can remain there and be like a temporary support structure for the robots to do sensing tasks. Now, one step after that is to have a larger system that is even fully autonomous and can do the onboard calculation and onboard navigation on those systems. So the idea is that it flies, it then approaches the surface, interacts with the surface using a admittance control scheme. So admittance controllers are controllers where the interaction with the environment is modeled as a spring damper system. And then we can control the trajectory of the robot in the interaction with the environment and have certain motions of the robots that have certain functionality. So here you see a video of that. So it flies, attaches an anchor. It can do this fully on board with onboard vision. So it's all on board. So it's no external localization system that is needed for that. Then it can perch down. Because of this angle change, it can actually change the energy consumption during this perching, and then interact with the surface, and then do different sensing tasks, you know, microscopic tasks, or even non-destructive evaluation tasks on the surface. Now, this was tested here at Nest as well, where we have this large hall where this type of systems can be tested. Now, one step after that could be, I mean, which we did here, is to combine this with a visual assessment of the environment. So it's a robot that can then fly, detect damages in the environment, so like damages on wind turbines in this example, classify them using machine learning algorithms, and then do autonomous touch and place or repair tasks in the environment. So this version just shows the classification, but newer versions can also do autonomous repair. So detection, motion, interaction with the environment, and repair, all in a closed loop manner without any human interaction. And I think this is really where the power of this type of robots comes in, because they can do this without having humans there. So they can do this autonomously. They can live on the wind farm. They can live in the building and do this more like an immune system of the environment, of the infrastructure, and like this do the repair and manufacturing tasks directly. Okay, so one step further of that is the idea to do not just repair, but do full manufacturing tasks. So the question is, can we have robots that would go there and 3D print structures autonomously and collectively together in inaccessible environments? So the vision could be something like this. So imagine a space environment, or imagine a natural environment which is inaccessible or at height. And so there we could have ecosystems of robots living in those environments and do 3D printing motions collectively, and by interacting with each other, interacting with ground robots, with humans, and like this do those tasks in an adaptive and cheap and safe manner. They could even collect environmental material to do those type of constructions. Now, this looks a little bit like a science fiction movie here on this illustration, and that's, I think, great news, because it's a great challenge too, as an engineering team, to do this. And if you want to do something like this, of course, we need to think about how we can do this, how we can do collective manufacturing. And also there we can again come back to nature, and nature is extremely good at doing that. For example, the bees are able to build those hives without having a star architect bee that is sitting there and making plans and drawings. It's really the bees that interact with each other, that interact with the environment, and like this can do those type of environmental manufacturing tasks. So they also use the environment as a form of communication, and to then show, use the information of what they have built to build the next step. So there are also other principles like that. So stigmergy is one, but also there are other principles such as templates that can help distributed agents to build structures collectively and robustly without a global map or global knowledge on position or a blueprint of the structure. The templates is another example. So, for example, the bulldozer ants, what they do is they bring a little bit of material inside of their nest, and they have two rules of what they do. So they go and they push the material until they feel a certain resistance, or they drop the material after a certain amount of time. And by doing that, they can build integral cylindrical structures simply by following these two rules without having a global knowledge of the structure they want to build. So this is another example of where simple distributed intelligence can lead to emergent behavior and emergent structures that are scalable and robust to failures of individual agents or failure or unknown environments. And so I think that's very exciting. So based on that as well, we were thinking of ways how we can build large structures by having flying 3D printers. And this really connects to the idea of doing that in the construction industry. And the construction industry is doing some 3D printing already. So on-site 3D printing is a big field in construction already today. But the problem is that if you want to build something big, you need a big 3D printer. And instead of having one big 3D printer, the idea here is to have a distributed swarm of agents that can 3D print collectively. So if you think about this in a kind of classifying manner, we see the y-axis being the axis or the build envelope of how big you want to build. And on the right side, the scale. So no, how big you want to build, but the axis in terms of how big your axis is. So how big your machine is, let's say. So if you want to build something that is very big, you need a big machine on the bottom left, right? And so it's limited by the envelope of the 3D printer. So our approach goes to the top right kind of aspect where we have multiple agents that would deposit materials and like this be completely unconstrained and free of the build envelope. So the build envelope is not constrained by the size of them because they can be freely flying 3D agents and like this build collectively. So this is what we call aerial additive manufacturing. Now, here is the robot that does that. And so it's the result of a large project that we had on that topic. And basically it's a flying vehicle that can stabilize the extrusion tip to a precision of a few millimeters, and then has cementitious material inside of its body that it can extrude in real time and like this build layers on top of each other to build larger structures. So we use the structure of piano curves, which are a very good mini architecture or print pattern, because we can extrude with only one line, a full complex structure, and like this, never stop printing. Now, this is shown here on 27 layers, building a proof of concept structure, but it shows as well that it is scalable and does work. So it works with cementitious material on one agent that can do that from flight. So we've also worked with other materials here, for example, polyurethane foam, which can be deposited from the vehicle. And polyurethane foam is a bit more complex to work with because it's hard to control exactly its deposition. So it expands as well, it has flowing behavior and so on. So the idea here is to control the process by having a scan drone that scans the structure. And by scanning it, it can inform the next building step. So the next trajectory of the 3D printing robot is adjusted based on the scan. So the scan informs and locally adapts the next printing step. And by doing that, we can see that it is able to build in a scalable manner different types of layers and build larger structures, even with very unprecise material, as we might call it, or not easy to control material. So the scanning in the loop and the printing and adaptive process can really help in that. So in some way, we can see that here we show a fully closed loop 3D printing process with multiple agents engaging together. Now, if you have something more complex, we could think even of multiple agents working together and sharing their tasks. So one does, so they three print in parallel, and they refill the material, recharge the energy in real time, actively interact with each other locally to adjust to what needs to be printed. So here we have 72 layers of a structure of 2 meters. We stopped at 2 meters just to show as a proof of concept structure again. Okay, so if you think about multiple vehicles, then we can do that in simulation, but also in real experiments here where we studied 3 agents coordinating their motions to build up something larger. So we studied up to 15 agent simulations or even thousands in larger other simulations. So how can they organize each other? How can they interact? What are the optimal trajectories to save energy, save material, and build as quickly as possible? And so if you want to build something very big, we can really do that by using a lot of agents together. So this work just came out now to end of September this year. So I'm very happy about this work coming together like that. And this really also because it's a very multidisciplinary effort that came together with the entire team. And it's the material science of building those type of 3D printing materials. So the cementitious material, for example, here is built from scratch. The robot is built from scratch. It's the mechatronics of it. It's the closed loop control of it. But it's also the control and the autonomy of the agent, the multi-agent coordination, and it's the architecture of what it builds. So all of this needs to be co-evolved, co-developed to manifest such a system as you see here. Okay, so the last topic I would like to share with you today is the idea to use robots to do water health monitoring. And water, of course, calls for, like the combination of flying robots and water seems counterintuitive. So one thing that we had to look at, which reminded me on my early ambitions, was fish systems, or underwater systems. And I was always very interested in the fluid mechanics of fish and how this influences their behavior and how they could move effectively in the environment. Even the Navier-Stokes equation was very interesting to me also quite a while ago, maybe not at that age. But basically, coming back to this, we looked into ways how we can have, if you can combine fish with flying systems. So aerial aquatic robots that can jump out of the water or dive into the water, depending on from which side you look at them. So there's actually quite a lot of systems in nature that do that. Flying squid being one of them, flying fish also. So they jump out of water and can use that to escape predators, but also to move potentially at low energy, so migrate longer distances like that. So here's a paper that came out in 2019, where we developed a flying fish type system that uses environmental water and mixes it with calcium carbide to create acetylene gas. And this acetylene gas is then used to, it can be ignited and can eject the water from the body of the robot to jump out of the water. So you see it here on the left, it's the acetylene gas that is ignited in a test, laboratory test of the process, and then can eject the water out of the body of the robot. I see like that, and this gives a pulse, so a force that can boost the robot out of the water. Now, if you then look at the whole system on the right side, you see how it jumps out. So this is a test here in around London, where we tested it in a small pond, where really the water wasn't very clean, but it was completely okay. So this still gave enough high quality acetylene that can be ignited and ejects the water. There's some spraying, a bit of gas jet you see, and then the jump is a distance of about 23 meters using only 0.1 grams of calcium carbide. So it's very little material that gives a very powerful boost, and like this can allow robots to overcome obstacles in the environment, like in the Arctic or in other environments where you have floating obstacles in the environment. So the kind of challenges that are in that include the modeling, so understanding how the physics works and what kind of forces you can get. So on the left side, we could model this with unsteady Bernoulli, where we can estimate the exit velocity of the water depending on the pressure and pressure development, which gives us an indication on the thrust of the vehicle. And this thrust can then be linked to the overall system dynamics, so the lift and drag, and be studied not just in air, but also as the vehicle enters the water. So if it flies inside of the water, of course, the physics changes a lot. So the density, viscosity changes, and there's a multi-flow effects that are happening. And the physics of that is actually very complicated. And so we can model this, we can study this with empirical methods, and like this get insights onto the motion and movement energetics. So the locomotion energetics of those type of vehicles through the environment in order to optimize those movement patterns and get systems that use minimal amounts of energy by moving through those environments. So also the challenge is, of course, in manufacturing, in testing, and in the design and control of those type of systems. And this is why it took us quite a few years that we work on this in this field. Now, another example, and this is related, is the idea to use a very small robot, and here it's a RoboBee type robot that can flap in air. It can also flap underwater, but then can also eject itself out of the water by doing hydrolysis. So hydrolysis is the process of using electrodes in the water to then split the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and this can then be captured in this chamber, as you see here on the top left, in the yellow chamber, and then kind of be ignited and then boost the robot out of the water, as you see here. So like this, it can overcome and fly off, keep on flying through the environment. So this work was done in collaboration with the group of Robert Wood at Harvard, who is leading the project, this project, and also the development of the RoboBee for many years. So here this work is really addressing the transition dynamics of those RoboBees. Okay, another example is a work that came out a few months ago, earlier this year, and it's with the group of Li Wen at Beihang University. The professor Li Wen is working on these adhesion methods inspired from the remora fish. And the remora fish are amazing of what they can do. They can attach themselves even if the surface is not very flat. And so they build these adhesion mechanisms that have similar principles and can, like this, be combined with flying robots to do hitchhiking in the environment. So imagine you have an underwater robot or a flying robot that attaches to underwater vehicles, and like this can move through the environment and saving energy of motion. So this works in different environments, on not flat or slippery surfaces. It's on a small robot that can jump out of water, fly out, transition between air and water. Here in relatively flat water environments, but still very capable and very powerful transitions that it can do, and like this attach and hitchhike through the environment. Okay, another example that I would like to share, and that's the last one from this series, is the idea to use vehicles that don't just fly, but can also do landing on water and then do sailing on the water. So we call this type of robots sail MAVs, or sailing micro-air vehicles. And as you see, the idea is that we have a vehicle that can fly in a flight configuration, then land and reconfigure itself, so morph itself into a sailing vehicle. And so this sailing vehicle then can detect certain things in the environment and do these motions completely autonomously. So for that, we had to develop fully custom or fully newly integrated sail controllers that are actually quite unique because of this particular architecture of those sail MAV vehicles, because we can also use not just sailing, but we can use the propellers, for example. And so the question is how we can combine propellers, flight, and sailing in order to optimize the energetic efficiency of motion through different types of environments. So once it then configures back into flight, it can then take off, and in flight, in air, it behaves more like a traditional aircraft and can then again land on the surface. So we are now developing different versions of that, and we started and are testing also the sailing motion, as you see here, and focusing also on outdoor operations. So here is a test in Lake Vrana in Croatia, and a lot of birds come actually there to spend their winters, and so it's a protected environment. And by flying and sailing, especially through the sailing, we can go much closer to the bird populations, and like this sense different things in the environment that are very difficult, if not impossible, to sense with manual methods or with boats or other tools. So this is something that I'm very excited about, that we can use those robots to do environmental sensing and even mix populations. So have birds and animals and robots living together, and the robots sensing what is happening and helping us to protect the natural environment. Okay, so we have also others that we work on, such as the aquatic micro vehicle that can fly, fold the wings, dive into the water, fly out of the water, or the Medusa system that can land on the water and have an underwater pod that can then do detection or water sampling tasks. And all this work actually is summarized now about almost 10 years of work, or it's partially summarized in this book that just came out in February this year. And so, yeah, please have a look. So if you're looking for a Christmas present, it is available on Amazon. So please don't be shy to look at it. Now, so this is a very exciting field. And also, again, it's the limitation of the superheroes. It's the limitation of animals, because both are maybe not that capable. They're still limited by their morphology of what they can do. Now, because of that, we look now into gods, in particular Proteus, for example, as you see here. And Proteus is a very good god because he's very capable of what he can do, and he's also the son of Poseidon, and it also represents alchemic processes and the subconscious, according to Carl Gustav Jung. And like this is a very inspiring god that can help us to develop virtues, but also metamorphic principles of how to adapt to different situations, different environments, and different interactions with the environment. So Proteus is able to change its morphology and like this move in water, move on land. And this transition and this adaptation, this metamorphosis of Proteus has led to this Proteus drone project, which we proposed a while ago. And the idea is to create flying robots that would fly, be entirely soft, move in air, move underwater, move on the water surface, and have structures that are fully soft and fully adaptive to the environments and the positions and how they need to interact. So this, I'm very happy that this was approved for funding by the European Research Council, which I'm very thankful for. So this project is going to start in January. Now, me being here and talking about this work, presenting this slide here also, again, I would like to emphasize that this is really not only about me, and it wasn't me alone who can get to such a point to this type of systems. So I would like to show you a few slides of things that we have been doing over the years, and I would like to thank the people or some people that have been involved in that. Now, the first one is the topic of multimodal locomotion. Now, this is really something that is very close to my heart, very core to the research of my group, and has started also already during a PhD that I did at EPFL, where I worked on jump gliding robots. And this is also multimodal locomotion, of course, and I would like to thank Dario Floriano, who was my PhD supervisor at that time, to opening my eyes to these bio-inspired systems. Then for postdoc, I went to Harvard University to the group of Robert Wood, where I also worked on similar topics. And so this has been very inspiring as well, and has helped very much to think about bio-inspired design. It's also part of the Wyss Institute of Bio-Inspired Engineering. So Hans-Jörg Wyss was the donor to Harvard on that topic. So I'm also very thankful to him for that. Since then, since 2012 at Imperial College, this has been a very important topic. And one person I would like to thank very much, especially in this, is Robert Sidal. And Robert Sidal was the first PhD student who started in the group. And so as such, he didn't just do research in the PhD, he also helped to build the lab, buy the equipment, make the case to the university and to the collaborators of all these crazy ideas and projects, and kind of helping me to really build the group and the facilities and activities we are doing. So I would like to really thank him a lot for that. It takes a lot more than just research output to help to bootstrap it from zero. Yeah, so out of that, also the collaborators, of course, who have helped us. We have several awards in this direction too. Good, so the second topic I would like to emphasize is the idea of robotic manufacturing. And so this is something that I've been thinking about since 2012. So around 2014, I think, I met a inspired gentleman called Robert Stuart Smith. And Rob was thinking about the same ideas, but more from an architectural point of view. So we came together and we created a consortium and proposed this completely crazy idea to the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, who eventually believed that it has merit and gave us funding to do this project. And together we then since have been working on that and together with the consortium building those robots. One important thing was also on the way the idea to do repair tasks. And so here's something we showed at the Drones for Good competition in Dubai in 2016, together with a team where we proposed robots that can do pipeline repairs. And special thanks there to Rob Sidal, who's on the right, as you see, and then Talib Al-Hinai as well, and Pisak Jamprayong, who were the group. So the four of us went together there and had a great adventure to propose a system, test it, and eventually hold this beautiful check in our hands. The Harvard Medal in 2021 was another big achievement. For that, I would like to thank Barry Dams, Sina Sare, Kitao Zhang, Paul Shepard, and Richard Ball, who were collaborators on that. Also for this Nature paper, this is the result of a lot of people, a lot of work, but especially the co-investigators, Stefan Leutenegger and Vijay Pawar have been very important colleagues on that. So all these people have become not just collaborators, but also friends throughout this process. So I'm very thankful to everyone for the support. Now, this environmental sensing, I was mentioning that, and I'm very excited about it, but we can go from ideas to design, to building, to lab testing, to then collecting the data inside of the outside, in the outdoor environments. And so doing that needs a lot of effort from the students and the teams doing that. So it's going to the field, the robot breaks many times, repairing the robot, and like this, keep the morale up and kind of doing it until the systems are really collecting the data that we want. So that's a big achievement. So thank you very much to the people that have spent all their kind of effort on that. Good, and of course, university wouldn't be anything without the students. And I've done several courses, which have been very inspiring. But one important thing in that was the Drone Society. So we launched a Drone Society. And this has been very inspiring and hopefully has helped a lot the community to learn about drones as well. And another thing I would like to emphasize is the wardening life. So I was warden for 4 years, and then Weeks and Wilkinson Hall, together with Arash Mustafi, where we had a team of 13 members for 220 students, and then for 3 years in Woodward Hall, where we built this new community with a team of 49 members that was led by Martina Giannoro and Mark Kennedy and myself, to bootstrap a new hall, student hall for 859 students. So this has been a great and wonderful experience and adventure together. Now, we have also had some media coverage over the years, and of course, the papers help in that, but it's also the Science Museum. So we had 3 large exhibits for several months, so a lot of visitors, a lot of listeners to the different features that we had. So I would like to thank Colin Smith and Caroline Brogan from the Imperial Press Office, who really helped us a lot to get traction and supported us throughout all the process. And from the EMPA Press Office, especially Andrea Six and Michael Hagman, who helped also from the start when the projects are new. So it's really was very helpful to get their support. I would also like to mention Stefan Kählin from the NEST team and media office, who is also actively helping also today going forward. Now, another very important addition was the flight arena, so that we had the honor and pleasure to build a new flight lab. As you see here, the yellow and the silver structure on top of the roof. And so this is the lab where we tested the robots, where the group was located, still is located today. And this would not have been possible without the donation of Bramal Vasudevan, who donated 1.25 million to the college to build that. And that has been a step change in the testing capacity of the group. For that, I would like to thank also Ferry Ali Abadi, who was head of department at that time, who was extremely supportive to me as well in the beginning. When I came in, didn't have anything, just some ideas about all this, so to get the traction, but also especially to Spencer Sherwin, who was a colleague from Bramal Vasudevan and who was probably one of the most important people to actually make this happen. So Spencer is now head of department, and so it kind of closes the circle going forward with this facility that is now operational. Now, at the college level, when I came to Imperial, there was not much organization between the different robotics groups. So we sit together with a couple of people and we structure this in 3 areas with healthcare, infrastructure, and domestic robotics. And so this has been very helpful to create a robotics forum between now the 41 research labs that are doing robotics. So it's a lot of robotics activity at the college, and it's now organized and has yearly funding from the university. So in that, also as part of this, we created a Center of Excellence for Infrastructure Robotics that I'm heading at the moment also. And for that, I would like to thank especially Laura Margheri, who was a program manager in my group at that time, who really helped to build up the whole visions, the structures, the proposals that made this possible to be approved by the college. Also, I would like to thank Nick Jennings, who was the vice provost, and David Gunn, the vice president of innovation, to actually support us and do this and make this happen. Now, going back and thinking back on the earlier days, I was always inspired by also material science. And because of that, in 2016 or so, I reached out to the EMPA Material Science Institute. And EMPA is very strong in material fundamentals, components, and applications, and belongs to the ETH domain in Switzerland. So it's located next to Zurich in Dübendorf. And as part of that, as an international satellite or international spoke of the Center of Excellence at Imperial, we combined this with the Royal Society Fellowship that I received then, and we created a partnership between Imperial College London and EMPA. Alice Gast, Gianluca Bona were both very supportive, especially Gianluca Bona also supported this financially to create a small group here and set up facilities. And in that, we then created the center at Imperial and one at EMPA that we then run together as a kind of joint center, joint activity since 2019. And that has been a great pleasure and success so far. So I would also like to thank Peter Richner, who has been very important in that process and been a supporter even before this partnership, and Tanya Zimmermann, who was head of department and also very supportive throughout the process. And Tanya is now the CEO of EMPA, so I'm very delighted to grow these activities further here. Now, these are a few people at EMPA and at Imperial that were partners in this. A special thanks to Aslan Miriev, who was the first scientist in the center to set up the activities here from zero, and also Ashutosh Chube, who's the current program manager, who's also helping to manage that. Special thanks also to Fabian Wiesemüller. Fabian was the first PhD student, and he was exactly like Rob Sidal, like basically sitting here at EMPA by himself in the large space and really now helping to grow the team. And so now we have more people here, so to work together, all together, and grow the activities. So in many ways, and I'm running out of time a bit, but in many ways, this is what the past was, what happens until now. And so I would like to just say a few words about the future. And the future will be very much linked to the activities here, and especially one vision that I would like to emphasize. So this is the EMPA campus, this is the Nest building, and the Nest building is a test bed for different type of building technologies. So this is the high-low, and this is actually where the headquarters of the robotics center is located now. I'm actually standing now in the middle of that, as you see in the background maybe. And this is wonderful, a wonderful structure and test bed for robotics as well as for other technologies. So there is a space next to it, which is currently not occupied. And together with Reto Largo and Enrico Marchesi, the idea came up to create a structure that is dedicated for drone testing. And so we call this the drone hub. And this drone hub will have different test bed and infrastructures that can be, where robots can be tested. So for example, facade elements, where robots can 3D print materials, do repair tasks, do cantilever manufacturing. And this is something we are doing now. Then also have natural environments where robots can biodegrade in the environment, where we can test this type of robots, biohybrid robots, and robots that can interact with the facade and doing repair and cleaning tasks. So this vision is more than a vision, it's actually happening now. We are in the planning phases for that. We have the space, we have the kickoff for this already done, and we are now looking for partnerships and use cases and case studies on those type of ideas. So it's the facade to interact with the facade, do cleaning tasks, surface manufacture, surface sensing tasks. Then it's the biosphere, environmental sensing, biohybrid, biodegradable robots, biodiversity monitoring, and it's the aerial additive manufacturing, going from the published work now forward into the next generation of this type of systems. We also have a large flight arena of about 1,000 meters cube, where we can test robots We have a wind turbine blade in the middle of the flight arena. We have bridge in the flight arena, water environments. So we are very well equipped to study sustainability robotics. And sustainability robotics is really where we want to go and what the kind of offering is that we can propose. The step after that will take one step further and integrate air taxis into the building. So drone taxis. So how do drone taxis interact with the building, interact with humans, and how are the interfaces working? So how can we recharge them? How can we do the logistics and so on? So eventually this will create an air corridor in Dübendorf where we can have an air corridor between the EMPA environment and the Swiss Innovation Park in Zurich, where we can then show how this can be a fully integrated vision for robotics, humans, and the built environment. So with this, I would like to thank the funders as well, of course, who have very well supported this work. So this has been very important. Without that, it would not be possible. And I would like to thank the group members who have invested a lot of their life, a lot of their inspiration into these projects. So there are many more than mentioned here, maybe 70, 80 more master students, but these are the core key members that spend a significant amount of time in the group, as PhD students, postdocs, sabbaticals, group leaders, research engineers. And so I'm very thankful for all of their hard work and support, not just on the technical side. Now, in many ways, this has been my family for my last 10 years at Imperial. And I'm also very proud of the alumni, so the people that came out of the group and now have faculty positions around the world. So this is a great achievement. I'm very happy to see that the community is growing coming out of the lab. So I would like to also thank, last but not least, my native family, my parents, of course, my sister, who for all the support. So words cannot express how much thankful I am and how important this has been. And so I would also like to thank my friends, my spiritual friends, as well as my intimate partners during all these years, who have been there always and supporting and being very understanding for me to work all these long hours and being in the labs instead of with them. So thank you very much for that, very much. And thank you also for your attention, and yeah, thank you for being here today. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mirko, for a very interesting and inspiring inaugural lecture. Now I have, if you allow me, there are quite a few questions that I will put to you. I would like to start with one from Darius Bushka, and that relates to the power management of the drones, in particular how they can operate and whether they can sustain themselves through a digestive-like system or some chemical processes with the surrounding water helping to charge them.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Thank you very much for asking that. So the energy, of course, better batteries are important, but also energy harvesting. So using wind as an energy source and like this sail through the environment, hitchhiking, of like attaching to objects that are already moving, the perching to sustain longer in air. These are topics we are, of course, doing. But eventually, you're right. It might be that we can use a digest environment. So use biological fuel cells to kind of collect material from the environment and then create electricity from that. There are some projects, some efforts in this direction, not in our group, but around the world. And so this has some opportunity. I think eventually we'll create robots that will be moving through the environment, feeding off the environment, then biodegrading, being fully integrated, then regrowing again. So this is the mid-term vision. So we're not that far away from that.
There are a couple of questions, Mirko, about the legal and ethical issues surrounding the drones that the industry may have to grapple with.
Yes, and of course, you can use your creativity for malicious uses of those drones, right? So if you want to do bad things and you're creative and intelligent, you can get quite a long way, of course. But this is not our approach. Our approach here is to try to show positive, life supportive, inspiring, helpful, and hopeful use cases and concepts of how drones and robotics can help us, help the environment, help humans to create a symbiotic relationship. So we cannot reject the bad ideas or the malicious uses. We cannot suppress that, but we can overgrow or overshine it with the positive ideas. And I think this is what we can do together.
Well, a more technical question is, what is the gap in the multi-drone system that will allow you to go from a laboratory to real-world applications? Is it like a firework display possible, or?
So, well, this already exists. I mean, the fireworks are being replaced by autonomous drone swarms that have lights and can do different figures in the air in 3 dimensions. So the Olympics, for example, were opened with a large drone show with, I think, more than 1,000 drones. I don't remember the number, but more than 1,000, I think they have been shown to do this type of thing. So it is happening today. The challenges are the regulation of like one pilot operating 10 drones. You know, is this allowed? How to manage that? And the regulation is not there. The challenge is the local versus global positioning and decision making. You know, how much they interact with each other versus how much they know in a global sense where they are. And what happens if there are failures of different agents? There are big questions in that, so people work on that. Not so much my group, but internationally there are a lot of efforts in this going on.
The other one is related to how do you, with some of these drones, to combat the adverse weather conditions and the windy conditions, etc. I remember some of these being part of your group design project.
Yeah. Yeah, so our approach to this has been twofold. One is to use perching to shoot strings, and by using the string, it can stabilize in different direction, right? So it can be like a partial perching, and like this, even if it's windy, it can stabilize the drone. Another work that we published was on adaptive architectures for neural networks, where different neural networks, where the complexity or the structure of the neural network, not just the weights of the different neurons, but the levels of how deep they are, can be adapted in real time to adjust to turbulent conditions or not turbulent conditions. And this can really help to combat adverse weather conditions. So it's the control and the physicality again that can help in both.
One final question I think I can squeeze in is from Fausto Ferreira. He thanks you for your great talk, of course. And regarding the biodegradable robots, do you think these can be produced also for aquatic environments, or there are challenges with waterproof prevention?
Yeah, so the cellulose, for example, is very hydrophilic, right? It likes water, so it absorbs water, more like a sponge. So if you don't want that, you need to have a protective layer, which can be something that is water repellent. But then if it's protective, then it might not biodegrade as easily. So it's this trade-off between protecting it from water versus using water to biodegrade. And so in aquatic environments, there is this trade-off. But I'm hopeful that actually these type of systems can be used also for aquatic sensing. So imagine you fly through an ocean, you disperse thousands or millions of sensors. They give insights onto the water quality, state of the environment, and then leave zero damage, zero footprint in the environment. Data without cost. That's, I think, the key.
Well, thanks very much, Mirko, and congratulations. I'll pass it to Professor Barbara Mazzoli for her vote of thanks.
Good evening, Professor Feria Lebadi, most valued and invited guests, respected teachers, and honorable attendees. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion to Professor Mirko Kovač. We are very grateful to him for sharing his work on biologically inspired aerial machines and their role in protecting natural ecosystems. Actually, I have been fortunate enough to have known Professor Kovač for several years, and we have been to many of the same events and conferences on robotics and bio-inspired soft robotics. I also spent some months in his laboratory at Imperial in 2017, and more recently, I went to his state-of-the-art laboratory at EMPA in Switzerland. On this occasion, I had the opportunity to observe his professionalism close up and the incredible originality of his technological solutions. His research topic is close to my heart. On a professional level, Professor Kovač and I have a shared vision on the future of robotics. We both believe that biomimicry in robotics and technology will have a fundamental role in saving our planet. So he is in fact to talk about sustainability in robotics, which means developing robotic solutions to improve the quality of the natural ecosystem by monitoring parameters and potential pollutants in situ and the recovery in habitats. However, the real revolution and breakthrough is the introduction that comes at a life cycle when inventing, developing, and producing machinery, technology, and robotics. By developing machines that are biodegradable or reusable, we can reduce our carbon footprint and electronic and technological waste. As Mirko highlighted for us in his talk, and has demonstrated to us by his innovations, to achieve this goal of sustainability, we need an interdisciplinary approach which merges biology with materials and engineering. Mirko mentioned that he was and is inspired by biology, superheroes, and gods. These sorts of inspiration have been manifested in his passion for addressing complex problems and his ideology of lending support to people and maintaining a positive attitude. I personally appreciate his integrity and supportive spirit, which are demonstrated by his collaborative work, his willingness to share ideas, and his capacity to build centers that are based on synergetic setups. In my opinion, Professor Kovač is the embodiment of someone who doesn't just talk the talk, but walks the walk. He leads by example. Mirko wants to see collaboration, synergy, and respect, and so he promotes these values and inspires us to follow him. In today's world of influencers, who sometimes have a very little of importance to say, let's follow and support Mirko, who, by contrast, can make a difference to our futures and foster brilliance and mentor the brilliant as he continues on his prestigious path. In conclusion, I'm personally, and I'm sure all of you, inspired by Mirko as a scientist and most importantly, as a person and a role model. So, please join me in thanking Professor Mirko Kovač. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Mazzolai. So to bring this to this inaugural lecture to conclusion, I also like to thank all the participants and for posting questions. I'm sorry we couldn't read all the questions, but you could direct them to Mirko later. And I believe you will receive an email with all the recording in case you'll need to go over it. So once again, thanks very much for your participation in this inaugural lecture, and congratulations to Mirko. Good night.